As usual, it's an honor to be here again. I'm in the middle of shifting and there are so many things happening, but I can't say no to Yashas because, he's carried on this Indic Researchers Forum through the years so sort of in a disciplined way that it's incredible to see young people taking an interest. And of course, I've come out of my own greed to have the kind of co-panelists that I do. I've been making notes because I'm sure I'm going to learn so much more than I can offer. But because I have spent most of last year on the border and in Myanmar, meeting most of the stakeholders, including the TACMADO or the EAOs, including local bodies on the border, I may have a perspective that might interest some of our viewers. First of all, I think it's not lost on anybody, and as my previous panelists have made clear, that things are complex. I have never called myself an expert on the Northeast because you can't actually ever be an expert on the Northeast, but even for learners like me, it is very evident that things are very complex. When we talk about narcotics, we talk about insurgency. It was in 2023, after the clampdown on poppy cultivation in Afghanistan, that the channels found a ready-made system in Myanmar, and that's when it exploded onto our borders. They found a ready-made system of channels of methamphetamine trade, poppy cultivation, to the extent that it was so quick on the uptake in Myanmar that by UNODC numbers, there is now 2 times the amount of production that was happening in Afghanistan of poppy cultivation in Myanmar. The quality has also improved because they're using drip irrigation systems. Methamphetamine labs are no longer small shops. These are sophisticated laboratories. Their manufacturing capabilities are enormous. It is really difficult for us to figure out how much they're really manufacturing. What we know is we know by what we intercept that comes onto our borders in the Northeast. That also some are counted in kilograms, some are counted in the amount of pills. So there isn't like this, this exact number that we can have. But if you were just to take into consideration the kind of interceptions that Indian authorities have made, and usually people say that what is intercepted is 10% of what is really out there. It will be shocking. It was only 2 years ago that in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and I'm sure my co-panelists are aware of this haul, that was caught by the Indian Coastal Guards of methamphetamine tablets to the amount of $4.5 billion. There were about 6,000 tablets that were caught, and they had come in on just trawlers coming in from Myanmar. And this was using the sea route. Every single day, if you were to track newspaper reports, just that, you would find that in Champhai district in Mizoram or in Manipur, you will find a couple of 100 grams being caught every single day. That just gives us an indication of how bad the situation is and how difficult it is going to be for us to control it, because as said by my previous panelists, that our borders are porous, and I've traveled end to end on these borders. I've seen the kind of, you can only be as good as the weakest link. So no matter how much you fence, no matter how much patrolling you have, locals possibly will just know better points. They'll be able to navigate these areas better. So it's going to be very difficult to man this. I happen to also be invited to Myanmar as an election observer, as an independent election observer. And one of the interesting things that I noted there was, out of 330 townships that they managed to go into elections for, there were about 64 townships that they didn't go because of the conflict. 60% of those 64 townships were across India's borders. That means that the majority of conflict that we have will be across India's borders, uh, anywhere compared to anywhere else in Myanmar, meaning that those will be ungoverned areas. Those areas will be areas that will have groups that will be using the illicit economy to keep themselves afloat. How do you negotiate with them? It's really difficult. If you look at, let's say, the Chin groups, CNF, CB, are divided. Under them, there are over 16, 20 groups each. Who controls what? Who do you negotiate with? Who is the deciding factor? This is going to be difficult for us to manage. Apart from that, of course, some of the numbers that we are seeing should be alarming. Um, 2025 UNODC shows a 17% increase in poppy cultivation. 2025 UNODC shows highest poppy cultivation in 10 years in Myanmar. 2025 opium output from Myanmar has already become 2 times of what it was from Afghanistan. And right now, what we know, seizures in India, the amphetamine seizures is 34 quintals in 2023 and 80 quintals recently. But that again is only a fraction. It only tells us how grave the situation is. I happen to meet a lot of people when I travel, and I try to meet a varied kind of people, not just administration or officials or the government, but also local businessmen. I have an interesting story which I often like to tell to just show how quickly drugs are also changing shape. Um, we used to know about Yaba pills from the very beginning. We knew in the 70s also they were popular. They'd come with, they were pastel colored medicines and tablets, and they'd come marked with Y. But the last time I was there, I met this gentleman, and he was a businessman who dealt a lot with the Chinese. And I said, so, where do you guys meet? And they said, oh, we usually meet at bars for a drink, and these are private dinners and things like that. I said, what do you drink with, your Chinese counterparts? Is it whiskey? Is it this? He said, yeah, usually it's that. But last time they gave me a glass of water. And I said, what do you mean a glass of water? He said, no, it was great, because it was odorless, and it didn't have any taste. It was just like water. But I danced. I danced for like 5 hours after that. And the next day I went, late at night, I went back home and I woke up my family and I told them, what am I doing all of this for? What can I gift all of you? And, they made a list of gifts which he agreed upon. Next morning, he woke up. He said, I had no hangover. I had no recollection of promising any of these gifts. Of course, the gifts aside, which now he had committed to, what I found out was it was another type of drug called happy water. So happy water does exactly that. It's colorless, it's odorless, you drink it, anybody can give it to you. You don't remember what you've done, but you have bursts of energy. I just tell this story not in jest, but to indicate that even the kind of new drugs that they are coming out with is going to be difficult for us to keep a track of. India has a burgeoning youth population. It is natural that it would be beneficial for them to sell it across the Indian borders. We know that the rate of HIV, whether it's intravenous use or other drug addiction, is the highest in states like Mizoram or Manipur, which has the most active transit routes, also from Myanmar, where drug trafficking happens from. So, when new drugs like this are being trafficked, one can only imagine how ill-equipped we are in being able to tackle it, because we don't even know what they are. Also, to sort of keep credibility continued in drugs, the names or the markings on the drugs are being changed very, very quickly. So you'd see new and new producers, new and new drugs coming out, and you don't know what you can trust, what you can't. So this itself is going to have a huge impact um, on our young population in the Northeast. Of course, we also know that insurgency has been a problem. Transnational ethnic ties have at times facilitated this sort of
Ma'am, you're on mute.
Muted.
Sorry, I think I pressed something. My apologies. My previous speaker, Professor Gunaratna, spoke about drone warfare. Most of these groups have training subsections within them, the ethnic armed organizations. So they are way ahead of us. By most accounts, they have anti-drone systems as well, something that most militaries may not be equipped with. So, ethnic armed organizations have no dearth of money. They have conducive environment and atmospheres to keep them going. There is no, elections that happened, and sure, there'll be some amount of international legitimacy that will be accorded to the elections, but that does not mean that the conflict is going to die down anytime soon. There isn't umbrella entity that has a political roadmap for these ethnic armed organizations either. Of course, people quote the NUG, but that doesn't mean that the NUG has control. If you hear the Arakan Army, they'll talk about confederations. They'll talk about a different sort of a state. If you talk about some ethnic armed organizations, they'll speak about independence. Some will speak about a larger autonomy. So there isn't a real political roadmap ahead. And with the kind of money that is coming in through the narcotics trade, through the kind of weapons that we are seeing in these areas, I think the EOs have no reason to scale back their activities. So India has to be equipped. We have to really, just to start off with, even be aware. Like my chair said previously, that people don't even know much about the borders. And let me tell you, we are only right now talking about the northeastern border. The Bangladesh border is also a very active border. When we speak about methamphetamines, let me take your memory back to the time when Sheikh Hasina actually enacted the death penalty for traffickers because of the kind of methamphetamines that were being trafficked into Bangladesh and the kind of impact that it was having, not just on young and unemployed people, but people who were corporates or IT functionaries who had to work on two different times. So the combination of a lot of these methamphetamines was also codeine. So it kept them awake for 2 to 3 days on. The death penalty had to be enacted. Who were the traffickers? Largely the traffickers were the Rohingya groups who had access coming in, coming out. Recently, we've also seen the umbrella organization which has brought the 4 Rohingya groups together, which is called the Four Brotherhood Alliance. And allegedly they're being trained by ISI. So our borders are going to be very, very important. We don't have enough scholarship, we don't have enough interest, we don't have enough discussions like this. And that is primarily the reason that I put everything aside and I wanted to be here. The more we talk about it, the more interest that is generated, the more seriously people will take what is going to happen. I would just like to end by saying, and of course I have so many other points, but I don't want to extend on the time that has been allotted to me. I would just like to end by saying that we have spoken so much about the Great Game West. I think what we are going to see is the Great Game East that is going to unfold before our eyes. We haven't even reached, and this is not the topic that is given to me, but I think we have to start digging deeper into even natural resources, critical earth mining. That is going to become one of the areas where China, India, and other international actors are going to go at head on. And that is going to have its own separate repercussions. I will end with that and I'll say thank you for inviting me.